So last time we looked at those for the point of saying when God does act, he's going to be doing it for the purpose of protecting his holy name, as Daniel alludes to in his prayer, saying, please do something for us like you did for us in bringing us out of Egypt, which you did and glorified your name. And the fact that the people of Israel and the condition they're in has been a blot on your name. And so he's saying, when I act on behalf of Israel, I'm going to do it for my own sake and my own name's sake. It's not actually for your sake I'm going to act. Now, they receive the benefit of his action. And what does that benefit include? He says, verse 24 and following, Ezekiel 36, "For I will take you from the nations, gather you from all the lands, and bring you into your own land." Now, of course, many prophecies earlier in Ezekiel, it spells out that God said he would drive them out of their land, cause them to be taken captive by the many nations and scattered all over the world. So now he's saying, one day, the day is going to come when I'm going to act for my own name's sake. I'm going to take you from the nations, gather you from all the lands, and bring you into your own land. Then I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you will be clean. I will cleanse you from all your filthiness and from all your idols. Moreover, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you, and I'll remove the heart of stone from your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. And I'll put my spirit within you and cause you, I will put my spirit in you, and I will cause you to walk in my statutes, and you will be careful to observe my ordinances. Why will they be careful to observe his ordinance? Because he's going to cause them to. And you will live in the land that I gave to your forefathers, so you will be my people, and I will be your God. Now, he has always been their God, even though they didn't live like it. They have always been his people, even though they didn't live like it. But remember, he's saying, because you are my people, my name has been profaned. Because you are my people. Everywhere you've gone, you profane my name. So I'm going to prove that I am a holy God, because anybody judging me by you, looking at you, would think I'm not a holy God. So I'm going to prove myself holy among the nations in their sight by doing this, by causing you to be a holy people. So he says, and you will live in the land I gave your forefathers, so you'll be my people, and I'll be your God. Moreover, I will save you from all your uncleanness, and I will call for the grain and multiply it, and I will not bring a famine on you. The implication is any more, as I have done in the past, as a discipline upon you. And I will multiply the fruit of the tree and of the produce of the field, that you may not receive again the disgrace of famine among the nations. When you claim you've got the creator God of the universe as your God, and then you're suffering famine, it kind of looks like you don't have him as your God, or at least he's not blessing you. So it's a disgrace. Then you will remember your evil ways and your deeds which were not good, and you will loathe yourselves in your own sight for your iniquities and your abominations. I am not doing this for your sake, declares the Lord God. Let it be known to you, be ashamed and confounded for your ways, O house of Israel. Thus says the Lord God, on the day that I cleanse you from all your iniquities, I will cause the cities to be inhabited, and the waste places will be rebuilt. And the desolate land will be cultivated instead of being a desolation in the sight of everyone who passes by. And they will say, this desolate land has become like the Garden of Eden, and the waste, desolate, and ruined cities are fortified and inhabited. Then the nations that are left round about you will know that I, the Lord, have rebuilt the ruined places and planted that which was desolate. I, the Lord, have spoken and will do it. Now, let me just, before I go back to the main point, let me just make an observation there. I'm not saying that prophecy has been fulfilled, but it does look all the world as if God has started the process. Not only are the people of Israel, at least some representatives of them from various corners of the earth, back in the land now, in part of the land, but the land which was like a desert and a waste place before they came back to it is now flourishing and growing and producing abundant fruit. I'm using that word in the broad sense. It includes fruit and grain and everything. And in fact, the Arab-controlled territories, when they had it, before Israel got there, the people of Israel got there and started coming back and were recognized as a nation again, the whole place was like a desert. But now that the Israelis have control of the land, it is flourishing, and right down the border between the Arab-controlled land and the Israeli-controlled land, you have like a Garden of Eden on one side, relatively speaking. Not fully yet. I'm sure it's going to be more like the Garden of Eden. But on the other side of the road, where the Arab-controlled territory is, it's still a desert. So there's certainly visible evidence that this process is in process even now, it would appear. Just an observation. Now, what does this have to do with the first 2 points, finishing the transgression, making an end to sin? I believe that this refers in Daniel, not per se to the work of Christ in which he did that accomplishes these things, but rather to the effect and benefit of the work of Christ that will finally be applied to his people Israel in spite of themselves, when God does this thing of bringing them back into the land and acting on their behalf for the fact of his own name's sake. That when in his time frame the fullness of the Gentiles has come in, he's going to do that, and he's going to restore the people of Israel to the land. He's going to restore them ultimately spiritually as well. Now, I'll comment more about this as we go, but I used to picture that God somehow was going to rapidly get all of them back into the land. Now, I say rapidly. I believe he's already in the process of doing that as a precursor to the final fulfillment. But nevertheless, in the 7-year period, I imagined that very early in the 7-year period, he'd have them all back in the land, and then he was going to save the whole nation all at once. I'm becoming more of the opinion that some are going to be saved early on, starting with the 144,000, okay? The 144,000 prophets and messengers will be marked, and nobody can harm them or kill them during that 7-year period. But that it occurred to me that the 7-year period begins with the signing of the treaty between them and the Antichrist that can't be believers. Now, the church is raptured out and gone. There's no believers on the face of the earth. It's going to be unbelieving Israel that makes the treaty. And I believe, now I've come to believe, probably, that the saving of Israel is going to be a process throughout the 7 years. And some might not even come until the moment they see him coming back and they look upon him whom they've pierced. Okay? But before it's all over, all Israel is going to be saved. Now, there might be some who die as unbelievers during that time, possibly. But in the end, every Israeli that's left still alive in the very end is going to be saved. Okay. So the finishing of the transgression and to bringing an end to sin appears to be the work of the Lord upon them during the last days, and probably during that 70th week. It would appear that it would be during that 70th week that process is when that happens. And it's the application of the death of Christ to them, but it's not in reference specifically to the death of Christ, it's the application of that to them. Then the next one is to make atonement for iniquity. Again, real easily you can jump to the conclusion, and I believe it would be wrong, and I have myself in the past jumped to the conclusion, and I think I was wrong, that refers to Christ coming and paying for sin through his death, therefore making atonement for iniquity. The word to make atonement in the Hebrew, kafur, means to cover over sin. Genesis 6:14 says, "Make for yourself an ark of gopher wood, and you shall make the ark with rooms, and shall cover it inside and out with pitch." That's the same word. Covering the wood with pitch and building the ark is what to make atonement for iniquity, what that word refers to. And the term as it's used here, describes the results that accrue from the atonement to the sinner. Okay? So I'm saying I don't believe that this is speaking in reference to what Christ did per se in making atonement, but rather it's talking about covering them with the atonement. The benefit of the atonement is going to accrue to them, but it's not going to happen until that 70th week. The sacrifice itself that Christ made was not the atonement that is spoken of here, but rather what he did in his death is the means by which the atonement was made, and this is the benefit that comes from it. In Leviticus 1:4, it says, "And he shall lay his hand on the head of the burnt offering, that it may be accepted for him to make atonement on his behalf." Okay? So there is the sacrifice itself, which is in one sense is the atonement, but as it applies to the one that receives the benefit, that atonement may be made on his behalf. So I think that that's what the use of the term here is when it says to make atonement for iniquity, to make atonement that applies to you, that you now are receiving that atonement and the benefit of it. And I'm just seeing all these things are things that are going to happen right at the very end as a result of the death of Christ and what Christ did to bring that benefit. In Daniel 9:24, we have this reference to make an end for atonement for iniquity, but in Zechariah 13:1 and 2, I think we have reference as well prophetically to the time when that benefit will be secured to Israel, to Judah specifically, but to Israel as a nation. Zechariah 13:1 and 2, it says, in that day, referring to the final day when all these things are going to come to pass, will be a fountain will be opened for the house of David and for the inhabitants of Jerusalem for sin and for impurity. And it will come about in that day, declares the Lord of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols from the land, and they will no longer be remembered, and I'll also remove the prophets and the unclean spirit from the land. That would be, I think, the false prophets and the unclean spirit that was motivating false prophets. But clearly, that's talking about during his bringing to pass the kingdom for Israel, and that is also the same time in which the fountain will be opened, in which the inhabitants of Jerusalem will receive the benefit of a fountain opening up for them to deal with sin and for impurity. All of that designed to say that I believe that these 6 things are things that have not happened yet, even now, and that they are yet to happen in the remainder of the balance of the time, the 70th week. The 4th one is to bring in everlasting righteousness. In Isaiah 1:26, and obviously Jesus Christ, who is perfect righteousness, and having come and died for sin, and then his resurrection being proof of the justification of man in regard to his sin problem, and then ascending to the right hand of God the Father Almighty in heavenly places. Clearly all sin has been dealt with, and he is perfectly righteous, and he has provided righteousness for us, so it'd be really easy to conclude that he has already brought in everlasting righteousness. But we're talking about the nation of Israel in a time period and events that tie to the nation of Israel, not to the broad work of Christ, which applies to all mankind. So we find references such as Isaiah 1:26, which says, "Then I'll restore your judges as at the first, and your counselors as at the beginning. After that you'll be called the city of righteousness, a faithful city." Again, he's talking about in the kingdom. The day is going to finally come when their city will be called the city of righteousness, a faithful city. That has yet to be so. That's a future event. Also in Jeremiah chapter 23, Verses 5 and 6, Jeremiah 23, 5 and 6 says, Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I shall raise up for David a righteous branch, and he will reign as king, and act wisely, and do justice and righteousness in the land. And in his days Judah will be saved, and Israel will dwell securely, and this is his name by which he shall be called the Lord our righteousness. So again, that's clearly when he comes as king. He has not yet come back as king. He didn't come as king originally. He came only as Messiah Prince, but to die for sin. He has not yet willingly received the crown as king. He is going to be doing that in the future at the end of the tribulation period. And that's when he shall be known and be called the Lord our righteousness, our Israel's righteousness. And he shall be doing justice and righteousness in the land. That has not yet happened. So it's a future event that would appear to be something that's going to take place as a result of the finishing of all these things and what God does to apply it to Israel during that remaining 7-year period, Daniel's 70th week. The fifth one, to seal up vision and prophecy. Literally, in the Hebrew, it's to seal up vision and prophet, which I find interesting. This did not take place as it has been held by many, as with all these things. A lot of people insist that all these things were fulfilled at Calvary, that's when all these things were done and finished. I'm already demonstrating I don't think that's the case, and that's also true here. Now, how do we know that vision and prophecy, or vision and prophet, were not sealed up at Calvary? Anybody have a guess? There's the time of the death of Christ. How do we know that prophecy was not sealed up? And I believe that means brought to a close. Okay.
John of the Isle of Patmos.
John of the Isle of Patmos. Many years later, 60 years later, before the final revelation and greatest prophecy of all, in terms of sheer magnitude of prophecy, with great details that we in fact need to understand Daniel's prophecy. It was yet to come. Now, I believe that the functions of vision and prophet will be brought to an end when Christ returns at the end of the week, the end of the 70th week. At which point all will have been fulfilled, and there's no more need for any more prophecy for future things, because it's all been settled and he's going to bring a fulfillment to it all. Also, this is not the same as sealing up vision and prophecy here, is not the same as concealing vision and prophecy, as it is in Daniel 12:4. It says, But as for you, Daniel, conceal these words and seal up the book until the end of time. Many will go back and forth, and knowledge will increase. This is a different thing. This is bringing a close to vision and prophet. And that will happen at the end of the 70th week when Christ returns, and he will bring fulfillment to everything. The last one is to anoint the most holy place. A lot of people say, yeah, well, that's what Jesus did when he came and died for our sins. He anointed the most holy place. Well, that doesn't, to me, make sense at all in light of examining it from many angles. Is the most holy place the inner sanctuary of the temple, the Holy of Holies? Exodus 26:34. Exodus 26:34. Says, and you shall put the mercy seat on the ark of the testimony, that's the ark of the covenant, in the Holy of Holies. Okay? Well, the Holy of Holies is certainly one of the places that's referred to as the holy place. And by the way, the word place in the original here in Daniel 9:24, you'll notice it's in italics. To anoint the most holy place, the word place in italics. So it's literally to anoint the most holy. But the Holy of Holies is called sometimes the holy place. So it could be that, 1 Kings 8:6 further. 1 Kings 8:6 says, Then the priest brought the ark of the covenant of the Lord to its place, into the inner sanctuary of the house, to the most holy place, under the wings of the cherubim. So clearly that's a reference to the holy place, that inner sanctuary, the place that the high priest goes once a year. Hebrews 9:25. Hebrews 9:25. It says, Nor was it that he should offer himself often, as the high priest enters the holy place year by year, with blood not his own. Now that's in reference to the high priest entering, which is alluded to earlier in the same chapter, where he goes in once a year into the Holy of Holies, here called the holy place, once a year on the Day of Atonement, to make a sacrifice and put the blood of the sacrifice on the Ark of the Covenant that was for the sins committed in ignorance. Okay, so clearly we have a place which is called the holy place, which is the inner sanctuary where the Ark of the Covenant is. Is that what he's talking about when he says to anoint the most holy place? Well, maybe, but did he do that when he died for sin? Look at Daniel 9:27. Daniel 9:27, which we're obviously going to be looking at in detail when we get there, but just to make this note, and he, which refers to the Antichrist, will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he'll put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering, and on the wing of abomination will come one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate. And Jesus referenced that in Matthew 24:15. He says, Therefore, when you see the abomination and desolation, it was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand, etc. So the point I'm making is this. There comes a point within the 70 weeks when, in fact, in the very end of that whole 70-week period, during the 70th week itself, the holy place is going to be desolated. It's going to have an abomination in it. So that seems difficult to believe, therefore, that the anointing in the most holy place is fully accomplished. I think it remains to be done. Christ is going to bring that to pass when he comes and gets rid of the Antichrist, gets rid of the abomination of desolation at his return at the end of the 70th week. Also, then, another possible interpretation of the holy place is the whole temple itself, not just the inner sanctuary, but the whole temple. Leviticus 6:25. Leviticus 6:25 says, Speak to Aaron and to his sons, saying, This is the law of the sin offering. In the place where the burnt offering is slain, the sin offering shall be slain before the Lord. It is most holy. Well, the place they make the sin offering is where they make the daily sin offerings in the outer sanctuary. So that's called a most holy place. Okay? So clearly, since the inner sanctuary is called the holy place, and the outer sanctuary is also called the holy place, it could clearly include the whole of the temple. 2 Chronicles 5:11. 2 Chronicles 5:11. It says, And when the priests came forth from the holy place, for all the priests who were present had sanctified themselves without regard to divisions. And then it goes on to talk about that. But there's only one priest who ever goes into the holy place, the Holy of Holies. So this can't be in reference to that. It says for all the priests, okay, came forth from the holy place. So clearly this is in reference to another part of the temple, the daily functioning part of the temple. Now my point there being that you've got reference to the holy place could be a term in reference to the whole temple, not just that inner sanctuary. And certainly, even if the abomination of desolation is put directly into the Holy of Holies, which I believe it probably will be, in concert with Antiochus Epiphanes sacrificing a pig on that altar to desecrate the most holy of holies, the Antichrist image of himself would appear to be put there. That would certainly desecrate the entire temple, not just that one part of it. So I think the entire temple is in view here, but again, the whole temple would need to be cleansed by the return of Christ. That is yet still a future abomination. Not only that, but what happened to the temple in 70 AD? It was torn down by the enemy, not the Antichrist, but by the people of the Antichrist to come, the Romans, by these Gentiles. They tore it down. You can hardly say it's been anointed. And then, of course, the holy city itself, Jerusalem, is called the holy place as well. 2 Chronicles 35:5. 2 Chronicles 35:5 says, "Moreover, stand in the holy place according to the sections of the fathers' households of your brethren, the lay people, and according to the Levites by the division of a father's household." Now, there's in the nature of this, it may be the temple site, or it may be all of Jerusalem there, but also in Psalm 24:3. Psalm 24:3. It says, "Who may ascend into the hill of the Lord, and who may stand in his holy place?" This is talking about who among the people. So it's not just the priests, it's talking about who is one who qualifies to be in the presence of God at all. Well, the people never get to go into the Holy of Holies. And the priests are there to make these sacrifices and may have the people when they bring the sacrifice. So it's again very probable that the holy place here is in speaking of the people coming into Jerusalem from the various places they live to make their sacrifices. Psalm 46 verses 4 and 5. Psalm 46 verses 4 and 5. It says, "There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy dwelling places of the Most High. God is in the midst of her, and she will not be moved. God will help her when the morning dawns." Now that is a clear reference to the city, Jerusalem, as the city of God, the holy dwelling places of the Most High. So that would be an allusion to the holy city, could be what is in reference to there when he says in Daniel 9:24 to anoint the most holy place. Could be the city itself. Ezekiel 45 verse 4. Ezekiel 45 verse 4. Ezekiel 45:4 says, "It shall be the holy portion of the land. It shall be for the priests, the ministers of the sanctuary, who come near to minister to the Lord, and it shall be a place for their houses and a holy place for the sanctuary." Notice that? The holy portion of the land includes the places for the houses of the priests. Not just the holy place for the sanctuary, but for their houses as well. And that's got to be in Jerusalem, not just the temple. And then Revelation 21:10, Revelation 21:10. Revelation 21:10 says, "And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God." The holy city, Jerusalem. Now, my point is this. All these things you could isolate any one of them out and it could fit the holy place. But I think it covers the whole realm. But the point is, all three, the holy place, the whole temple itself is the holy place, and the holy city are all going to be still yet in the future violated in a way that it would not be fair to say that it's been anointed to the point of being a fulfillment of Daniel chapter 9 verse 24. In fact, the holy city itself is said to be a trampling place of the Gentiles until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. Now that's still going on. In Luke 21:24, Luke 21:24, it says, "And they will fall by the edge of the sword and will be led captive into all the nations." That's in reference to the attack upon Jerusalem during the 70 to 73 AD period under Titus and Roman legions, and Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. So at least up until the beginning of the 70th week. All right? But in the midpoint, it becomes, if you will, even if you could say, well, the first half of this 70th week, the first 3.5 years, they have the right to do all their stuff in the temple. In fact, implies the rebuilding of the temple and all the goodies. But it's still going to become a trampling place of Gentiles when it's violated by the abomination of desolation. So it will not be till the end of the 70th week that the whole city is going to be anointed, if you will, and be holy for God's people. Truly holy. And then Romans 11:25. Romans 11:25. It says, "For I do not want you, brethren, to be uninformed of this mystery, lest you be wise in your own estimation, that a partial hardening has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. And thus all Israel will be saved, just as is written, the deliverer will come from Zion. He will remove ungodliness from Jacob, for this is my covenant with them when I take away their sins." Now that does not happen until sometime during the 70th week. Now my point in all of that is to say that these 6 wonderful things that remain for Israel are just that. They're things which remain for Israel. They're not things that have been accomplished yet. Even in the first 69 weeks, they were not accomplished. They were not accomplished even between the 69th and 70th week by the work of Christ. Indeed, that work of Christ, if you said it was accomplished to do these 6 things, it's undone during 70 to 73 AD by Titus and the Roman legions. This is going to be a work which he's going to bring to pass on behalf of and apply to the nation of Israel at the end of the 70th week when he establishes the kingdom. And from then on, it will be a holy place. And all these things will be done for Israel during the process of the 70th week and concluded with the 70th week. All right, before we go on, any questions about that? All right, now, verse 25 brings us to the beginning of the 70 weeks and the fulfillment of the prophecy in connection with that. It says, "So you are to know and discern that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem," and please note, it does not say to restore and rebuild the temple. It says to restore and build Jerusalem. That's very important. But from the issuing of such a decree to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Now the total period of prophesied time is 70 weeks. That 7 weeks and 62 weeks makes up a total of 69 weeks. And as we understand it, that would be 69 weeks of years, 69 sevens of years, which is 483 years, we've already seen, of 360 days each. From the issue of the decree to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there will be a total of 69 weeks. It says, "It will be built again." Jerusalem, will be built again with plaza and moat. The King James says walls there. Now, moat, I've researched it, and I know if you're King James only, it's got to be walls. But if you're not King James only, and you know that people can have different ways of rendering different words, this would appear to be a better rendering, because this is descriptive of a protective, if you will, sort of defensive wall with a moat outside of it. So wall isn't completely off, but it doesn't get the whole picture. All right?
You mean wall in place of plaza?
No, moat.
Okay.
Okay, with
Plaza,
plaza and moat. The moat is the one that King James, I think, is plaza and walls or something like that.
My footnote says streets for plaza.
Yeah, plaza would be streets. Yeah. Okay. Even in time, I think the King James says streets and walls, and this is plaza and moat. Even in times of distress. So the city is going to be rebuilt by virtue of this decree being given. All right? The fact of the matter is the temple was rebuilt during the 49 years of the first part, which is apparently why it's broken up in 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Now, that doesn't affect the prophecy. It doesn't affect the outcome of the prophecy. And we can't prove it, but it would appear all the world like that first portion of 7 weeks is the time during which they were rebuilding the temple. Because even though they went back much earlier, and that's why it's important to recognize the decree that begins this is the decree to restore and rebuild the city. Because it was much earlier that they went back to try to rebuild the temple, but they never got the job done. And it wasn't until much later. Now, excuse me, let me think here. See, make sure I get this straight. There's so much stuff here. I'm sorry, I said the temple. The 49 years is the portion during which they were rebuilding the city and bringing it back into function. Okay? The 49 years, the first 7 years, first 7 weeks, or 7 7/7s, 49 years, covers the rebuilding of the city itself. Okay? They had already rebuilt the temple before that. Okay, now, the decree is recorded for us in Nehemiah chapter 2, verses 5 and 6. Nehemiah chapter 2, verses 5 and 6. And of course, to really appreciate it, you might on your own this week want to read the first 2 chapters at least of Nehemiah to get the whole picture here. But there's a description of the condition of the city and all that's not going on there, and Nehemiah is grieved by all this, and he's got a long sourpuss in front of the king. And the king said to me, verse 4, "What would you request?" So I prayed. He'd asked him what's wrong, and he finally told him. And he said, "What would you request?" So I prayed to the God of heaven, and I said to the king, "If it please the king, and if your servant has found favor before you, send me to Judah, the city of my father's tombs, that I may rebuild it." Okay? And then it goes on to say that he then was given such a decree, and not only a decree saying, go build your city, but he sent him all kinds of documentation and paperwork to get help and materials and all kinds of things. So the king said to me, the queen sitting beside him, "How long will your journey be, and when will you return?" So it pleased the king to send me, and I gave him a definite time. And I said to the king, "It please the king, let letters be given to me for the governor of the provinces beyond the river, that they may allow me to pass through until I come to Judah, and a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the fortress, which is by the temple, for the wall of the city, and for the house to which I will go." And the king granted them to me, because the good hand of my God was on me. Now, this is in chapter 2, verse 1. It says, "And it came about in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, that wine was before him, and I took up the wine," etc. So this happened in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes during the month of Nisan, which is the first month in the Jewish calendar. Okay? Now, this means that from the issuing of the decree, which they know, by the way, was in on March 14th, 445 BC. Okay? Now, March 14th, it would be approximately the 1st of Nisan in the Jewish calendar. And so it says in the month of Nisan, and there's something, Sir Robert Anderson has some detail there which I'm not fully grasping, but basically which is in effect saying that it's reasonable to conclude that it would be about the 1st of Nisan that this occurred. And so that makes it the 14th, 445 BC, 14th of March, 445 BC. Now, by the way, I saw one piece of evidence that according to the astronomers, it was 444 BC. When I saw that one, oh, wait a minute, how did I get 445 out of that? And you know why? Because the astronomers don't have the silly no zero between BC and AD. I mean, they have a zero. And so in their reckoning, astronomical reckoning, it's 444. But in our calendar, it's 445. Okay? So now, we're just about out of time, so we're going to have to hold the rest of these goodies. And we're about to get us some really exciting goodies here for next week. But when you that's what starts the prophetic period. That's what starts the 70 weeks. Now, it's more accurate to say that's what starts the 69 weeks. Because as we're going to see, there's a gap between the 69th week and 70th week. But the whole 70-week period starts with the decree. But from the decree to Messiah the Prince is 69 weeks of 360 days each, which is 483 years of 360 days each. So that's the beginning of it. And then the next point is this. Well, what is the close of it? The close of it is Messiah the Prince, as it says in Daniel 2:25, until Messiah Prince. Okay? Now, the only event which fits this description of Messiah Prince coming, with respect to both the nature of the event and the time factors that are alluded to here, 483 years from the issuing of the decree until Messiah the Prince, the only event that makes any sense or any possibility for the closing of the 69th week is the triumphal entry into Jerusalem by Jesus Christ several days before the Passover that's alluded to, and we'll just start to look at it now. We'll look at it more next week. But look at Luke chapter 19, beginning at verse 29. Luke 19, starting at verse 29. It says, "And the city was filled with confusion, and they rushed with one accord into the theater." That's not, I'm in Acts. I'm reading Acts. Does that make sense? What am I doing in Acts? Well, Luke wrote Acts. But that still doesn't get me to Luke. Luke 19. Okay, now I got it. Luke 19, let's start at verse 28. He said, "And after he had said these things, he was going on ahead, ascending to Jerusalem. And it came about that when he approached Bethphage and Bethany, near the mount that is called Olivet, he sent 2 of his disciples, saying, 'Go into the village opposite you, in which you enter you will find a colt tied, on which no one has ever yet sat. Untie it and bring it here. And if anyone asks you, while you're untying it, thus you shall speak, the Lord has need of it.' And those who were sent away and found it just as he had told them. And when they were untying the colt, the owner said to them, 'Why are you untying the colt?' And they said, 'The Lord has need of it.'" Now that has to be a supernatural response on their part at that point. And they brought it because, when they say, "Well, yeah, so what? It's my colt. What are you doing with my colt?" That doesn't answer it. Well, God obviously arranged it. And they brought it to Jesus, and they threw their garments on the colt and put Jesus on it. And as he was going, they were spreading their garments in the road. Now, by the way, one coming as king would not be riding on a donkey's colt. This is very humbling to be coming like this. A king would be coming, at least, if he's going to be riding, he'd be riding on a great and glorious steed, with much fanfare. There's going to be fanfare, but with much plumage and covered with great robes and glory. Pomp and circumstance, yes. And as he was going, they were spreading their garments in the road. Now we're going to get some pomp and some circumstance and some acknowledgement here. "And as he was now approaching near the descent of the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of the disciples began to praise God joyfully with a loud voice for all the miracles which they'd seen, saying, 'Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord.' peace in heaven and glory in the highest. And some of the Pharisees in the multitude said to him, Teacher, rebuke your disciples. And he answered and said, I tell you that if these become silent, if I shut them up, say, you be quiet, don't say anything, the stones will cry out. And when he approached, he saw the city and wept over it, and saying, If you had known in this day, even you, the things which make for peace, but now they have been hidden from your eyes. For the day shall come when your enemies will throw up a bank before you and surround you and hem you in on every side and level you to the ground, your children within you, and they will not leave in you one stone upon the other, because you did not recognize the time of your visitation. We're out of time. That's totally significant to everything that we're reading in Daniel chapter 9. We'll see that next week. Let's close in a word of prayer. Father, we do thank and praise you for what you're showing us here, for the great, powerful, and great details of this prophecy regarding future things. And Father, we thank you for the power of that which has already demonstrated itself to be fulfilled